Hello, everybody. This is Bart Sharp, and you are on Becoming Quantum Conscious at United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 103.5, broadcasting out of the beautiful city of New Orleans, Louisiana. And we are also on Facebook, YouTube, Roku, and the UPRN Talk Radio website, www.uprntalkradio.com. And this show is recorded for Christmas Eve. I'm a few days ahead of it. It's actually the night that the Three-Eye Atlas is closest to the planet, which I've been tracking that as a psychic some, and to me it's like these are almost like a well-wisher collective consciousness of beings, and kind of like an identity that it's hard to conceptualize because they are a collective. Their reason wasn't to come visit us. We're just kind of a sideline for them, but more like to check in with the consciousness of our sun. Interesting, they were behind it for quite some time. There's some interesting stuff behind the sun. I meditate a lot with the sun and go into that reality of what the sun is. If you are a meditator, I suggest that you meditate with the sun behind, visualize it being behind your heart and coming into your heart to where your heart and the sun commune as one. Really a wonderful meditation, empowering. Anything you can do to create a bigger embodiment of vibrations inside your physical body to where you start feeling it on a energetic or astral level, I think is a good thing in general. Part of what the upcoming consciousness is getting out of our heads and getting into our bodies. So I'm really into those exercises. And today's show is along the themes of, the title is From 25 to 26. And I just got a surprise that I'm doing a solo show today. And so I just wrote down like 4 pages of notes, cards, and in just an instant, I wrote down some ideas of like, what would I like the world to grow to? Not what I think is going to happen or what will happen. I have no idea what that's going to be like in 2026. Has a nice ring to it, though. 2026. But what I'd like to see happening, and I kind of see the world in a American tone as well as a European tone because I live in both worlds, and of course I'm just getting a little small vision of both worlds in Austin, Texas and Southwest France. And I'll just tell you what I see amongst the cultures that I interact with. And first with the Americans in the USA, we're very driven for results. We do consciousness work to change our immediate life. And we're doing more therapeutic approaches, doing things that are supposed to change our vibration now. Like I see a lot of the sound healing, yoga, and then different things like family constellations work, and a wide variety of other things. Change us now is kind of the general theme. My observation of Americans and being I'm part of it, this is my story as well, is that we are in a lot of pain, and that pain has pushed us to change and improve. On the other side of Americans, the pain has made us repress it and go into lots of distractions and addictions. That is the other side of it. But I do see a lot of people jumping into to let's find a better way to live, and it's my job. On the other hand, in Europe, or particularly France, and I meet a lot of different cultures there, there's a lot of exploration about ancient wisdom, about how we can connect to something much greater and be a part of a bigger whole. And that type of collective consciousness is the focus there more. Interesting enough, when we think about the two different cultures, we could separate them by saying the Americans are more in a me attitude and the Europeans are more in a we attitude. And it really reflects in the spirituality, as the Europeans are, let's connect to a greater whole. Let's be a part of something bigger in the world, bigger in spirituality. And it's that type of growth with it. Less about the emotional content that we have to change our emotions because we need personal change. It's just an interesting comparison between the two. That's one of the things. I just have a list of stuff here, and I'm just going to go in one after another. It seems like it's fragmented or stuff. It probably is because I'm just ad-libbing this with the little note cards here. I had a canceled show today, if I hadn't mentioned that before. So we are in ad-lib becoming quantum conscious. Sometimes it's good to do ad-libs because in that creative process, you jump into things that might surprise you. And of course, that's beautiful. If there's one big thing that I think I would love to see the world change with is dropping polarity, or some would call it duality. In other words, there's a right and there's a wrong, there's a good and there's a bad. And the components with that is that you're judging somebody with that polarity. And as soon as you make a judgment, you put up a wall. You put up a barrier of some sort. And not only is the barrier between you and that person, but it's also inside of you. In other words, when you do the judgment that they are wrong for doing that, how dare they, that type of attitude, not only are you projecting an energy out against somebody, which is felt by, people in the world, but it's also an internal mechanism that's going on inside of you. You start to see the world in a more narrowed way. And you're not seeing a bigger picture. You're not seeing the other people's side. So instead of a polarity, if something offends you or you do not feel comfortable with it, instead of going, oh, that's bad or wrong, maybe another way to do it would be, I don't think that way. I wonder what gets them to be thinking like that. In other words, you're joining in with them and really putting a question, a big question mark out there, and questions open up consciousness. What is their world like? You're joining into their world. It doesn't mean that you're going to bed with them or, they're coming to your home and you're having dinner together. It just means that you're working to understand and you're dropping the resistance. You're open to openness. You're separating out of your judgments. And what this does for you when you start to look at it that way is your awareness opens. You start to see the things in a bigger world. Now, you can not like something, disagree with something, say that that is potentially dangerous the way another person thinks, and not judge it. What I just said were observations. They were not judgments. In fact, if I look at them with curiosity, I wonder why they think that way, wonder what their world is like. And I'd like to see what that feels like. I'm just dropping all the barriers. I'm letting a flow happen between myself and other people or other parts of society. And good things happen generally when that happens. I don't have to carry that weight anymore. And when I'm not carrying the weight, that energy I use to carry the weight gets applied to other things that I would like to become. Gets applied to my innate intelligence, which is an internal power that applies to what we are involved in, what we are consciously thinking about. That's how that works, and it's really a great way to do it with that. And so this is huge. If we ever let go of duality and we're just open to perceive people, perceive the world without a judgment, it would all look very different. And once again, we can strongly disagree with things and think things are dangerous, but then we just make a choice. We make a choice on what we want to do and leave it at that. In fact, our actions are more powerful because more of our innate intelligence and our innate power get applied to whatever actions we want to take. We're internalizing power. When we are projecting out with a judgment saying these people are bad and wrong, they get an onslaught of emotions, of our fears, of our concerns, and that isn't power. That is diffusion of our power. And whatever you decide to do doesn't have as much power. So, what we are really looking for in all of this, bottom line, is safety inside of ourselves. And the judgments and the emotions applied to the judgments diffuse our safety. And therefore, when we don't feel safe, we create a stronger action. We have a stronger judgment. And therefore, we have more turmoil, we have more effort, we want to force through life because we feel like there is something that doesn't make us feel safe. So we create that opposition to it with judgments. and to really take that matrix and just let it all fall like a house of cards, we stop judging it. We stop looking at this. And there's just one really crucial question. You know, why I'm always getting the initiatives of my awareness to open to me. In other words, I see a situation I do not understand. I ask a question. Question opens the awareness. It's neutral. It's non-judgmental. It is an exploration that is asking my collective consciousness to join in with my brain and give me something bigger than what I can think of. I'm working on a bigger platter when I questions. So the question, you know, I'd be asking is, what part am I playing in this scheme? You know, how am I being a part of this? What part of my unconsciousness is guiding me to have such stress in a certain situation? And one of my favorite questions, I have to thank Gary Douglas of Access Consciousness for this one. What is right about this that I'm not getting? In other words, I want to know what's unconscious about me that I'm not aware of. And it's funny when I ask that question, I'll say it again. What is right about this that I'm not getting opens our awareness to see something else. It's a very magical question. I can be even at home looking for my car keys and they're lost for whatever reason. And I ask that question and something in my consciousness opens and I turn and generally I'm looking right at my car keys. Why is that so? Particularly the car keys are easy, but it is a really important principle. I really know unconsciously where my car keys are. I put them someplace. So unconsciously I know. I just can't remember in my conscious mind. So when I ask the question, what is right about this that I'm not getting? My unconsciousness is requested to come in and be a part of that process. And therefore, my memory comes in. I know exactly where those car keys are. And I just will drift right over to them because my consciousness isn't exacting. My unconsciousness will help me guide and drift or turn my head in the right direction without me thinking about it. And I see where they are. And that's what a question does. It opens the consciousness to see something our conscious mind is not getting. And it also comes to the point that you are recognizing that all the answers you need in life aren't coming from your brain, aren't coming from your mind. They can be coming from a greater consciousness that is your body, that is part of the collective consciousness of things. So asking and just allowing those answers to show up are a big thing. It's a concept of the space of consciousness inside of you is really quite big. That would be your body consciousness, but also the space of consciousness would be things that you're connected to. That could be past lives or other dimensional bodies, but also things you're connected to in the world, maybe things that you haven't been even visited. I'm sure the sun, as I meditate with the sun, is a part of my awareness. I'm not for sure how that contributes to my active awareness, but because it's so big and such a probably the most conscious being in our solar system with all of its power, uh, it has something to offer to us. So that's why being in touch with our body is so big. Okay, so let's go to this next part. We're on page 2 already. What is your magnet? And what does that concept mean? That your magnet is this internal intelligence, innate intelligence that attracts for you. And you really want to get it working. And step 1, if you want to get your magnet working, that just attracts things without you doing things. Most people believe that you have to use force and effort and work and judgment to get things done in life. You're out there pushing and pulling and doing actual labor. And all of that stuff is necessary, to some degree. Then there's another part that most of us magician type of people know, that there's an internal magnet inside of us that attracts, that gets people to contact us, that gets the right concept that we're looking for to show up in our lives. This is part of that internal magnet. And how do you get that magnet working so strong that when you decide you're going to do something, it's weird that people start contacting you that seem to be helpful resources. Different things start showing up. It kind of surprise you, but they're synchronistic with what you want to create. What does that magnet require? A, cut out the judgments. Judgments take a tremendous amount of energy to do. And then we build up defensive systems to keep those magnets up. So if you are hating a group or hating a person every day and you're just yelling and screaming at him internally or maybe externally as you sit in your living room or whatever, you're just barking out judgments. And that requires a lot of unconscious energy to keep them up. Because when you are sending that stuff out, it depletes you. Because your energy is getting applied to things that probably you don't want them applied to. Most of us would like our energy to be applied to our dreams, what we would like to create in life. So letting go of the polarity is probably the biggest wish I have for 2026. It's funny how 2026 is. It's like 26, 2026. It just has a rhythm to it. I really like it. So to create our magnet, there's another part of it. Doing things that you love. Having a space in your life. You may have this job that's demanding and it may not be our heart's desire, but we're doing it. We have reasons for doing it. There may be parts that we really like, but it's still a job. And that's okay. But I do recommend in 2026 that you break in and find things that really enliven you. And that's it. When you do them, you have more energy. And it's one of the real litmus tests of, what is your heart's desire? When you think of it, when you do it, when you're in action with it, you have more energy. And it builds an internal magnet inside of yourself that attracts the universe to you to help you do more of it. More things happen with it. And this is the type of thing that is so important if you want to live in this place where you have this big magnet that attracts things and your life gets to be lived in that type of space. I was just interviewing a friend, Carl Finch, for last week's show, who created all of this crazy music with a band called Brave Combo, polka, Latin, rock, third roll, all fused all together. In a time that nobody did this. This was in 1979. And that's what he kept saying. It's just like, I felt like I just had to do it, and I wasn't going to compromise by not doing my dreams. I always had space to create these things that I felt were my creative essence. And he followed this important word, fascination. And the fascination energized him. And he never let anything get in his way like judgments. And therefore, it just seemed like all the connections, all the people that needed to be in his life to help Brave Combo happened. 40 years later, they're still playing. So this is a really important part of the Aquarian age concept, that we are opening to new possibilities and a new evolution inside of us. So in 2026, I'm hoping people will let the judgments go. They may be in opposition to other people or not agree with people, but they don't have to attack them, label them, put all of these things and bring in more polarity to the situation. They can just say, well, I'm going to play differently. I'm going to do it differently. Now, when we think about the Aquarian age, what does that actually mean? What's going to change? When we look at the most basic theme of the Piscean age compared to the Aquarian age, the Piscean age was a time of man-made law. We had the Romans come in, who brought in the Roman Catholic Church, who defined a way different way to worship Jesus. Interesting enough, this is also a time when the gods started becoming human figures. When we think about Isis or all of these gods in those eras, they weren't really humans. They never had a body. They were energies. They were a state of consciousness. And here we are, the laws of Jesus, the laws of Buddha, the laws of Muhammad, all man-made laws and spiritual leaders. But of course, this is much bigger a man-made law. We had all kinds of laws that the Romans and other cultures made, and it was in a very masculine-oriented way. Piscean age is the age of nature-made law. In other words, we're going to have to respect the planet and follow the messages of the planet more. But also what that means is we have to follow something inside of us that's connected to the planet, that's connected to the solar system and the universe, that we are part of that, and to have that bigger freedom that we are a part of a greater whole. First rule, drop the judgments. Drop judging other people and other things, and feel what that feels like inside of us. It's a thing that we get out of our heads and start listening to something inside of us. So, and it really brings us to the next concept of like, what is life beyond duality and polarity and judgments? It's called the great beyond. That's just kind of a nickname for it. It's my own personal nickname. You could also call it being in the space of your own consciousness. It's opening to something bigger than a typical awareness, that we're kind of locked into our minds. We are open to an awareness in our body. And it opens us to a greater wholeness. The mind and the body are supposed to work together. And the body has an intelligence that's connected to more than what the mind is. The problem with the mind is the mind likes to do things in efficiency. In other words, if you start brushing your teeth one way, your mind will influence you to brush your teeth like that the same way every day because it's easier. It's a habit. And the mind likes that in a neurological way because it takes less energy for the whole body to operate that way. And the mind is about neurological efficiency. Always wants to follow habits because it knows the routine. But when we really talk about consciousness, creating sophisticated things like your own internal joy and happiness, your own divine love, efficiency may not be the answer. Doing it in a very predictable and rote way may not get us there. The brain and the mind want to do it that way. And so it's like, oh, if we pray at 6:30 in the morning and we do this routine, this will be our spiritual fulfillment. That will be our spiritual practice. And we'll get it. Well, you'll get it to some degree, but you won't get the big picture because growth in this spiritual development is always ongoing and changing and growing. Therefore, we need to look into the reality of unpredictability. That means that we stay in the space of our body and try new things. But one thing that is predictable is it's mid-show, and I want to tell everybody that you are on Becoming Quantum Conscious. My name is Bart Sharp, and you are on United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 103.5 in New Orleans, Louisiana. And the theme today is from 25 to 26. What I would like to see in the world to change to. Now, it's interesting when I rattle off the little, UPRN stuff. It is something my brain knows well. It is in the habit of doing that, and it just rolls off my tongue, and it's so easy. I don't even have to think about it, and the brain loves that. But when you're talking about higher love, you have to drop out of that. To get out of the rituals and routines and look at your life every day as a new learning experience. To evolve to a new place. Now, it still means that you can still have a job, work 40 hours, and do a lot of the same routine places. But when you start to open to this possibility that there's a greater consciousness inside of you, all of that changes. You'll find that your job gets much easier because you're in a bigger open space of awareness, and things will start to happen. It's always interesting working a job because I used to do it as a school teacher. And everybody is in predictability. They have their routines. They're doing their same little things. And it feels very secure. It feels very safe for everybody involved. However, when I started doing consciousness work and started breaking into this, wow, life could be so much different. You know, I can start feeling the energies of the situations and feeling my body energy in relation to the situations. And I found out I started doing teaching much differently. There was a certain level of aliveness and excitement and curiosity that I'd kind of forgotten. You know, I was a well-experienced, well-seasoned teacher. And, you know, we all had our routines, we all had our attitudes. And suddenly I was just dropping them. And it was really just wild and crazy on how all of that happens with that. And we're on the path to wholeness. Now, it's funny, in just a little bit of my biography, after I put in all my years in teaching and they started giving me a pension, I don't like to use the retired word because I don't feel like I'm retired ever. But I had this freedom to get to do anything I wanted to do. You know, my bills were paid. And that's the real true point of what money is to give us freedom to do whatever we want to do. You know, when you get enough money that you have that type of freedom, your time is free for you to create whatever you want to create. To me, that's wealth. Okay, we had a little stoppage in the recording. Hope that all worked. So wealth is the freedom to have all the time to create whatever you want to create. So here I was. What am I going to create? More consciousness. How do I get more conscious? I start working on emotional issues. So I started learning shamanistic techniques to really perceive the deep repressed parts of my emotions. And away I went. I just cleared and cleared and cleared all of these shadow issues of repressed anger, shame, things that were abusive to me, you know, and the list goes on. And I did this for a couple of years. That was my morning, basically. Then after I cleared all I could for the morning, then I would go on the rest of my day. So one day I'm in a meditation and I go out of my body and I'm walking between the worlds. In other words, you're in another reality, but you're not for sure what that is. It's almost like a dream, but it's not a dream because you're aware of it happening and you don't feel like you're asleep. I love that state. And I'm looking at the horizon, you know, the sky, and up in the sky I see 13 white stars and 13 black stars. And I'm just like, wow, that's amazing. Kind of in a dreamlike state, like, whoa, man, this is cool. Anyway, all of a sudden those stars start moving a little bit. And I realize they're moving towards me. And this is all happening in, you know, an instant. And the next thing I know is all of those stars fly into my body. 13 white stars, 13 black stars. And I just fly off of the couch, standing up like, what the heck happened? And the next instant I know is I feel like I'm in a state of ecstasy. I feel full, whole, for the first time in my life that I have ever felt that way. It was like an instant elevation. And this is due to all the shadow work I've done in clearing all of this stuff. This is something in my collective consciousness that say you need a sort of an event to cross this over the next barrier. For the first time in my life, I felt this unconditional love that felt real and authentic. Strangely enough, my experiences of what I felt of love before that, from this new point of view, it's almost like I was reading it from a book, but I really didn't understand it. So here I am in this new state of love, ecstatic, like under a new drug, wandering around the house. And it's like, well, what's the desire now? It's to serve other people, to help other people, to share whatever this is. And that's when this big change happened in my life, where helping other people became more important. And that's what I'd like to see more in 2026 is people coming to actualization of themselves in their own unique way, to where when they step to the other side, they're going, well, all my needs are met yet. I feel whole. What's next? Help other people. Serve other people. And the important thing is you're doing it from a whole person. You're not helping other people for a reward like, oh, if they acknowledge me, that's going to be my fulfillment. Not exactly. This is more of, I just do it because this is what love is. I just do it because it feels like the right thing to do inside of me. I don't know if that's going to be the case for everybody, but I suspect the desire to connect and make the world bigger and better is what actualization is all about. It's like the next step. You do this. You don't decide, well, now that I'm full of love and I feel so great, I think I'm going to go to the Bahamas and drink Mai Tais. I don't think it works that way. You're stepping out of that tension release reality and the judgment reality that many people live in, and you open into this concept of living in a space that feels whole and full, that feels of love. That's what's going on there. And I think in the American attitude of clearing things and releasing these emotions and getting deeper into this, because that individual person in me needs to change, is an important concept, that we do that and keep moving on to this personal growth. That would be my desire to see more happening in 2026. And, what this opens up is getting to know our heart's desire. And our heart's desire is something I recommend you start asking that to show up in your life. It's like, well, what is my heart's desire now? And what is right about me getting to know my heart's desire? What would it be like for me to see what that is about? Now, the thing is that it's not one big thing. It's not like my destiny. Your heart's desire are generally a lot of things. It's a ongoing fascination with life, and you starting to see what makes you expand, what gets you excited, what brings more energy into your life. When you are starting to do and live in a state that I'm living my heart's desire, I'm doing these things that really I'm excited about, I have more energy, my enthusiasm is there every day, then that magnet starts to show up and you are fulfilled. You feel more fulfilled. And this enthusiasm is infectious. It's just goes out to everything you do. You change the energy for more people to do it. And when more people live in their heart's desire, they're not into the polarity. In fact, they start to see that, wow, my fulfillment and the heart that is full of love and happiness changes the world around me. I'm connected. I am in a bigger whole with everything. And this is an agent of change that is passive, but yet is extremely effective. It's not about let's tear down the system and our rage against the machine. It's more like, no, I'm going to find my path, and then I will influence the machine to change. I will have the wisdom to know what to do in the moment. And this is something about this body consciousness that I've been speaking about, is to not live in the fears that you're not going to know what to do in the future, or if a particular situation shows up and you start gathering fears about that. Body consciousness, or this consciousness I'm sharing about, brings in more of an attitude like, I don't need to worry about that. I will know what to do at the time. Maybe there's some things I need to prepare for, to learn knowledge, or, do things financially so I'm stronger and more suited to whatever's going to show up. But I don't have to be in fear of it. I don't have to use a lot of energy to emotionally prepare myself. I don't have to stress about it. I just do the things that I think are good to do. And then I go back to my own center and live my wonderful life. This is a type of sovereignty that I would love to see happening in 2026. And knowing your heart's desire is like baby steps. You start doing things that you love doing, and they may be little things, but you start cultivating it. You become the creative source. And what you start to step away from is the world of entertainment, that the world is supposed to entertain you. You may still watch television, or for me, I like to watch football games, but that's not my source of what's filling me up. That's just kind of a distraction, and I notice that. And that's all I need. I find that what fulfills me is my creativity, that wholeness inside of me. Which takes us to the last concept. I have so many of them, but I'm going to stop with this one. And that's just living in space. That's what David Hawkins, the author of Power versus Force, calls it. And it's so accurate. In other words, when you start to have a consciousness that you feel your heart, and not just the beating, but the space of this light in it, but then you start to extend beyond that of your whole body, and it starts to feel like this vibration of something higher, and it changes its tunes, its vibrations. Sometimes it feels grounded, sometimes it feels connected to the earth, sometimes you feel something maybe angelic inside of you. But the one thing that's consistent is it's a higher vibration than your mind. And we start to learn what that is like, to perceive a vibration of our whole body. And it starts to get lighter and lighter. In fact, the whole idea is that we become more of an embodiment of light. The brain steps out of the way. the mind quits trying to dominate. In fact, the mind is still there, but it serves the body. Instead of the mind having the body serve the mind serves the body. And they work together harmoniously that way. But we get our intuitions. We have this spontaneous thinking happening that is very body consciousness. We just know what to say at the right time. We do things from that knowing, and we just jump into it. And, you know, when you start to hear bullshit in the world, lies, whatever, and in this world of all the theories going out there, various types, this is a very important thing to have. In other words, you listen to your gut, and your gut just looks at something and goes, you don't really need to deal with that. You don't need to pay attention to that. That's not relevant. Everybody thinks it is, but it's really not. And therefore, you might read the stories about the conspiracies or whatever, but they don't seem to like scare you or make you fearful. You know that you're a whole person. You know that whatever is going on inside of you will persevere everything. In fact, it's almost like it's you're very much of this reality, but you're beyond the reality. You're living in your own energy. And your own energy is more of an infinite source. And therefore, you're really walking with something that is boundless, has no boundaries at all. And so when we start to work in this stuff, for my hope for 2026, we are just a bigger space. We influence people. We influence them by not saying a word. We just do it through us. And they get that collective consciousness. That idea starts to spring forth. This energy is 100 times more powerful than fear. That's a lot of fun, to be able to skate around in a reality that is so potent. In fact, fun is the right word. You get to live in a place that's special and light. And so, you know, the first steps of getting out of the matrix that so many people are living in, stop judging. Start perceiving. Start feeling what's in your body. Start feeling the light in your body. Be in the question of life. Be in your curiosity, and create from that place and keep creating. The only entertainer that you need is you connected to you. All of these things like cell phones and televisions and such can be such a distraction that we're dependent upon them for entertainment, and they're so fulfilling, they're so seductive. But it keeps us away from knowing ourselves, which is our greatest asset, our greatest strength. And I think essentially that's what everybody wants, is they want to be into that strength that they know their uniqueness. So those are my desires for 2026. My name is Bart Sharp, and this is Becoming Quantum Conscious, and you're on United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 103.5. And I wish you a great Christmas and a great 2026. And we'll see you on the show again, hopefully. Bye-bye for now.